Part 12. My evil imperial wife is too arrogant, trash against the world, BlackBelly evil wife is too arrogant. Author, Lan by Gezi. Chapter 111. A day later, Lum Wan opened his eyes. The injury in his body had been repaired by the nourishing essence pill he took, and his energy and physical strength had returned to their peaks. The 10 families except the Xian family got up one after another, looked at the end of the forest, and got ready to go under the command of the middle-aged man. You guys are ready to go too. In a quarter of an hour, we will set off with the people from the 9 major families. Lance jumped from a big tree, he adjusted his clothes at random, and said to the students from Yanzhou Kingdom. Teacher, are we going to cooperate with people from the 9 major families? After Xianxia experienced some incidents in the extremely cold mountains, the whole person no longer laughed before entering the mountains, and he talked a lot less. Lance chuckled lightly. No, all allies are hostile to the place where Tianhanjinjing was born, we are only going together temporarily. Xianxia nodded without saying much. Although he longed to get the Tianhanjinjing in his heart, he felt that he had no ability to snatch it. The disciples of the 9 great families and the Yanzhou kingdom obeyed the middle-aged man who was the leader of the 10 great families, clapped his hands and called everyone together and said, we are going together now. After finding Tianhanjinjing, you will act separately. The alliance, including the 10 great families, will end there immediately, and everyone will have their destiny. The unanimous alliance of the 10 aristocratic families before was just to close the news. Who would obey that when they arrived at the birthplace of Tianhanjinjing? Naturally whoever grabbed it would win. Yes, the crowd replied in unison. Go, the middle-aged man waved his hand, so the elite disciples quickly swept toward the depths of the forest. Lum Wan swept the people in the 9 major families. She found that all the sword sovereign powerhouses who appeared before were not in the team at this time, and she had already gone to the front to prepare for the battle. This time, the 10 major families sent elite disciples to follow along to compete for Tianhanjinjing, and it was mainly for experience. Judging from the 2 sword sects that appeared before, the sword sects of other families must have reached the extremely cold mountain range, and there are many sword emperors. Lum Wan hooked her lips, and she didn't know whether the emperor invited the 2 sword sect powerhouses from Yanzhou kingdom. She was not afraid of the arrival of so many powerhouses, but felt that it should be the case. The stronger the strength, the more vigorous the competition, right? Although she doesn't like to use intrigue, she likes to fish in troubled waters. The group kept on their way. Yekinghan and Yekingyu were also inconvenient to leave in the Ye family's team, but they occasionally exchanged glances with Lum Wan. Ling Tianhao also shoved a jade into Lum Wan's hand, and told her that if she was in danger, she would crush the jade, and the strongest sword emperor of the Ling family would sense it. The whole way was very quiet and there was no movement of a single monster. Everyone was wary, and Li Xiang cast complicated glances at Lum Wan from time to time. Xianxia, who was not far from her side, noticed the strangeness of Li Xiang, remembered a bit of news he had inadvertently learned, and was silent for a while, and finally gritted his teeth and slowed down a bit, and only shouted softly when Lum Wan approached. She. Lum Wan. Lum Wan glanced at Xianxia, who didn't have much contact with her, in surprise. She could even say that they had conflicts over Yun's affairs before. She couldn't guess what he wanted to stop her. What's the matter? Be careful of Lexiang. When the 2 passed by, Xianxia's silent whispers fell into Lum Wan's ears, and then he didn't say much, and kept a little distance from Lum Wan and continued at an hourly speed, before looking at her. One glance or one more word. Lum Wan was a little surprised why Xianxia reminded her. She only thought that Lexiang had some problems before, but she didn't take it to heart. Now, because of Xianxia's reminder, she was a little more concerned. In the immortal cultivation realm, the impact of the weak and the strong eats into one, and she can even be promoted to the Mahayana stage immediately. She has always known that there is a truth. Don't underestimate anyone who seems to be inferior to your cultivation base or strength. The details are absolutely successful or not, and sometimes the bad things are those inconspicuous people or things. After letting go of her spiritual sense, she also found that Xiang frequently casts strange glances at her, and even left a black stone every other section of the road, or left a black scratch on a certain tree. Lum Wan's eyes darkened slightly. This Xiang's strength is not very good, but there is always a sense of disobedience. Xiang's actions of throwing stones and scratching on trees are obviously marking people. It seems that some people are preparing mantises to catch cicadas and orioles behind. Mo Yan, do you think there was a problem with me arguing with that woman before? Lum Wan communicated mentally with Mo Yan while rushing on the road. Mo Yan's deep black eyes flowed lightly, but he didn't look back, and replied decisively, there is naturally a problem. She has a sealed power in her body, and she instantly improves her strength with the woman you met in the final competition at the academy. Power is the same. There was a trace of doubt in Lum Wan's eyes, and then a small arc of calculation was raised on his lips. Mo Yan. What are you trying to do again? The flames on Mo Yan's forehead moved. As long as this woman showed such an expression, she would definitely try to trick people again, and she would definitely ask him to take action. Can you erase all the secret codes she left along the way? Lum Wan looked at the stone Xiang dropped again. Mo Yan closed his eyes. He was the king of the dignified demon realm. He didn't expect to be ordered by a woman to do these boring things when he was in trouble here. You think those people who erase the secret code she left will not be able to find them? Where is the Tianhanjinjing? Those people can be found naturally, but they won't have any time to prepare an ambush. When they arrive, they can just disrupt the situation, and we can fish in troubled waters. Lum Wan's glazed eyes smiled a little more. Meaning? The corners of Mo Yan's mouth twitched. This woman is not an honest person, but it suits his appetite. As long as it is not a sinister, cunning, ruthless person, such a temperament is more suitable for taking the road of the strong. From the contract with Lum Wan to now, he found that Lum Wan is not a good person, but his character is not bad. She is very cunning and good at calculating, but the people she identifies will treat each other sincerely and generously. All in all, Lum Wan's temperament is changeable, but it can make people who come into contact with her recognize from the heart, and she has an invisible magic power that she wants to make people close or trust. With a sigh, Mo Yan found that the more he got along with this black-bellied little woman, the less he became like the cold and indifferent self before, but he was unexpectedly not disgusted by such a change. He closed his eyes, and a trace of demonic consciousness that no one noticed came out from his body, swept up all the black stones behind him, and piled them all under a tree with traces of Xiang. Except for that tree, all the trees that were left with black marks in front were wiped out by a powerful demonic consciousness. There was no problem all the way. Half a day later, when everyone rushed to the end of the forest, there was a sudden earthquake and the mountains shook. There were many colorful clouds in the sky not far away, countless birds flew in the sky, and a bunch of dazzling golden light shot straight at the sky. Skyrim. The Tianhanjinjing is about to be born. Let's go. The leading middle-aged man turned into a stream of light and disappeared at the end of the forest. My evil imperial wife is too arrogant, trash against the world. BlackBelly evil wife is too arrogant. Author, Lan by Gezi. Chapter 112. I saw the golden light that shot directly to the sky not far away with a gentle force and slowly spread out, echoing the colorful clouds in the sky, and a colorful rainbow suddenly hung in the air. Beautiful. Quick, go. The leaders of the major families instructed the family members to fly away in the direction of the vision. Lans looked at the place with deep eyes, turned his head and said to a few people, let them go first, we will go at this speed. A few people were puzzled, but when they saw Lance's solemn gaze, they stopped what they wanted to ask. Although they had an infinite desire in their hearts, they still did not dare to disobey. Yes. Lum Wan glanced at Lan Si meaningfully. This fox is smart. At this time, the front is probably already fighting again. As Lum Wan expected, their speed was neither too fast nor slow, but the distance from the team of the 9 major families in front of them was getting further and further away. A loud beast roar was surpassed. Roar. Such voices are ups and downs, with different coercion, but it can be heard that there are absolutely a lot of them, and even a wide variety. There are so many monsters screaming. Xiao Ziyang couldn't help showing a bit of surprise and speechlessness in his eyes. Since the last battle with the Fire Ant Colony, he now particularly hates being fought by wheels. Now that so many monsters are haunting, does it mean that they will join the endless battle again? Lum Wan stood beside him with a low laugh and jokingly said, "You also have to thank Teacher Lan for his wise move, otherwise we might have already fought with the monsters at this time. At this time, I'm afraid it's not just humans and monsters fighting, but the group of monsters is also fighting." Yunzimo's cold eyes were as deep as a well. "Teacher, don't we need to go there anymore?" Xiao Ziyang looked at Lan Si and asked tentatively. In fact, his desire for Tianhanjinjing is not very deep. Of course, if a peerless spirit grass is born in front of him, he will definitely run in that direction regardless of it. Lance raised his eyebrows, his tone indifferent. "What do you think?" He, I think we can wait for them to kill almost before going out. Isn't there a saying that the snipe and the clam fight for the fisherman's profit? Xiao Ziyang really hates melee. Yunjin stretched out his hand beside him and patted his head, suddenly remembering what Lum Wan used to scold Xiao Ziyang, and couldn't help but say, "Idiot. Yunjin, your skin is tight, right?" "And you patted my head again." Xiao Ziyang turned his head and glared at Yunjin. The already tense atmosphere at the moment was also relieved by Xiao Ziyang's idiot question. "Okay, when are you still making trouble?" Hu Fei, who had been silent all the way, suddenly frowned and scolded the two of them. Yunjin squinted at Hu Fei and ignored him. Xiao Ziyang snorted coldly, "What the hell?" Hu Fei glared at Xiao Ziyang with anger on his face. Ignorance Junior. He is distraught now, and he is also tempted by Tianhanjinjing without denying it, but he knows that he has a few pounds and a few tails, and it is impossible to compete with those sword sects and sword emperors, not to mention that he still has a task at hand. He glanced at Lexiang vaguely, and secretly asked why the adults were not here yet. Xiao Ziyang had always been disgusted with Hu Fei, and just as he was about to scold him back, he was stopped by a look from Yun Lan. Now is not the time to fight for righteousness. In the woods where they were fighting before, more than a dozen people with black cloaks were moving fast, but they found more than 20 black stones with secret signs under a big tree in front of them. One of them squatted down, picked up one of the stones and looked at it, and said to the leading man, "Master Secret Envoy, this is our contact signal." The leading man's voice was hoarse and sullen. "It seems that Lexiang has been discovered." "So what?" one of them asked eagerly. The leader casually pointed at one person and said, "Go in and find out if there is any situation." Yes, the person who was called flew into the Crimson Forest without hesitation. After a while, the man got out of the forest, stood in front of the leading man respectfully and said, "Master Secret Envoy, there are 3 roads ahead." Without the contact signal, the subordinates can't tell which way they went. The leading man was silent for a while, his face was extremely gloomy, and after a while he spoke. "Just now this forest was shaking, presumably there was a vision, but this forest itself has the effect of isolating the vision, only we can only see it when we reach the end of the forest. We will go in 3 separate ways, and when we reach the destination, we will kill Lum Wan and his sisters first, and then try to compete for Tianhanjinjing." The main task they received this time was to kill Lum Wan, and Tianhanjinjing was only incidental, so even if it was automatic, the task must be ranked first. Yes, the secret envoy. So more than 10 people divided into 3 waves. The leader wandered in front of the 3 roads for a while before flying into the leftmost path. The road he chose was exactly the one that Lum Wan and the others passed by. Lum Wan and his group, who were at the end of the forest, did not stop because of the beast roar coming from the front, and quickly left the forest. It's just that the forest is on top of a high cliff. As soon as you leave the forest, you will see a snow-capped mountain in front of you. From the middle of the break, it is a high mountain composed of red rocks. Below is an open valley, which is the road leading to the mountains, but now there are many monsters crawling forward and biting each other with red eyes. How many obstacles to move forward quickly. These monsters feel like crazy. Seeing the same kind of people keep biting and killing people, they are not very aggressive when they encounter people from the 10 major families. It's wrong. Yunlin stood on the cliff and observed the bottom. The battle at the bottom of the valley showed doubts in his eyes. Lan Si also cast his gaze downward, but did not answer immediately. Instead, he asked Lum Wan with a smile, "What do you think, Lum Wan?" After listening to Lance's question, several people all looked at Lum Wan in unison. Everyone saw her previous performance, and inexplicably felt that she should know. Lum Wan twitched at the corner of his mouth and gave Lance a white glance. It wasn't that the fox didn't know it. Seeing his brother's suspicious eyes, he said leisurely, "Did you hear anything?" Several people listened quietly. Xiao Xiang frowned and said, "The sound of beast roars and fighting." Lum Wan glanced at him speechlessly. "Listen carefully. There is a flute sound like the wind." Yun Zimo suddenly looked at Lum Yandao. Lum Wan glanced at him admiringly and replied, "Yes, the reason why these monsters kill each other is in the sound of the flute." You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. My evil imperial wife is too arrogant, trash against the world. BlackBelly evil wife is too arrogant. Author, Lan by Gezi. Chapter 113. Hearing the conversation between Lum Wan and Yun Zimo, several other people listened carefully, and they found a very ethereal flute sound in the distance. This is Ye family's animal control technique. Lum Yubai's eyes were far-reaching, with a clear look on his face. A warm smile appeared on Lance's handsome face, holding his hands in his arms. Yezhan is really amazing, and only he can use such a handwriting. He is worthy of being a peerless genius in the eastern region. Lum Wan was non-committal. She had seen a similar method of controlling beasts in the beast mastering section. If her strength reaches the sword sect or the formation of pills, she can also achieve this realm of beast control. Unconsciously, her hand caressed the ice bracelet again. She was strong and powerful, and a determination burst out from the bottom of her heart. This turned out to be the flute sound controlled by Senior Yezhan. What a bull! Xiao Ziyang couldn't help showing a look of adoration in his eyes. That man was the myth of the eastern region for nearly 100 years. Listening to Xiao Ziyang's address to Yezhan, Lum Wan suddenly realized that Lan Si's address to the sword sect powerhouse was not only a senior when he talked to Xian Bojian, and after that, no matter who mentioned it, he would directly call him by the name of his peer. Even she faintly felt that Lan Siwanya's tone was indifference. Apart from his special appreciation for Yezhan, he didn't show any respect for the sword sect powerhouses at all. It may not be easy for other people to find out, but she also has this kind of heart in her heart. She used to be a fairy in the spiritual world and she has no fear of the strong swordsman at all. In her eyes, they only represented a higher level of cultivation than hers at this time, and at most other than that, it was their appreciation for individuals, such as the same appreciation for Yezhan. The strength of the sword sect is only equivalent to the cultivation level of the core formation stage in the immortal cultivation realm. She used to be like an ant in her eyes. And she dared to conclude that Lance and she are definitely not the same type of person. He has a deep secret behind him, and his cultivation base should be hidden. I am afraid that even the usual gentle temperament is an appearance. But who doesn't have a secret? Lance has no hostility towards her, that's enough, she has no intention of exploring other people's secrets. Seeing that Xianbojian took the disciples of the Xian family out from the other side to join the elite disciples of the other 9 major families, and was about to rush to the foot of the high mountain, Lanciyo said, "Let's go too." "Already?" The others followed him and jumped off the cliff, rushing towards the foot of the mountain. Along the way, the monsters fought each other, and from time to time there would be red-eyed ones who would attack them when they saw them, but they were easily strangled by the 2 leading men, Lu Mubai and Yunzimo. Lu Muan looked at the rainbow floating on the distant mountain, and a faint heart palpitation occurred spontaneously. She frowned, and it seemed that this time it was more fortunate than for luck. However, she is not afraid, and she does not have the heart to move forward bravely. How can she rush to the road of the strong? Mo Yan, that 7th order monster is hidden. Lu Muan found that since the fire ants attacked, the sense of oppression that enveloped the red forest gradually disappeared. Mo Yan closed his eyes and lay on Lu Muan's shoulders, without raising his eyelids. It must be the appearance of the human sword sect that made him hide his figure, and the Fire Ant Queen was also driven by him to besiege you. Yes. But the person named Yezhan must have discovered him. Why? Lu Muan asked with great interest. Self-conscious after Mo Yan finished speaking, he didn't speak anymore, quietly rested his mind. A trace of spiritual energy quickly penetrated into his body from the outside world, and the demon power lingering in his dantian was much more mellow than before. After being separated from Mingxiu, Lu Muan made several potions of medicinal pills for Mo Yan. The lost cultivation base of his blood essence was quickly made up by the medicinal pills, and the demon power in his body was almost accumulated. If it weren't for the wrong time and place, he would have planned to find a secret place to condense the demon mansion. Lu Muan glanced at Mo Yan. Intuition. She also has an intuition that the metamorphosis monster is definitely not easy to deal with. Because the faint sound of the flute was still echoing in the sky, they basically reached the foot of the mountain without much hindrance. At this time, the disciples of the 10 major families had already drilled in from a vast cave at the foot of the mountain. Lance looked at the entrance of the hole cautiously, and asked everyone to restore their energy and physical strength to their peak before entering. After a quarter of an hour, he waved his hand and led everyone into the cave. The inside of the cave is very bright. There is only one path leading to the depths. On both sides of the path, there are scorching magma rivers surging and rolling. After another quarter of an hour, they crossed the path, and then a hillside of volcanic rock appeared. The sight of crossing the hillside and entering the destination is surprising. The elite disciples and powerhouses of the 10 major families stood in the direction of Lu Muan, and in front of them was a lava lake that was constantly bubbling with hot bubbles. In the very center of the lava lake lay a slender golden liquid, which was slowly solidifying. The most important thing is that on the opposite side of the 10 major families, and also in the other direction of the lava lake, stood 2 men in different clothes. Although one of them looks handsome, it has a sense of femininity. There is a thin cyan horn on his head, and the other is 8 feet tall and burly, with a few scales the size of fingernails on his side face. Behind the 2 of them were more than a dozen 6th order monsters, and there were only 2 races. It was recorded in the mainland monster record, they were Tianei Shanmang and Lingzi Beast. Looking at the more than 10 6th order monsters following them, it is not difficult to guess that the 2 people standing in front of them must be 7th order transformation stage demon cultivators. Lu Muan's eyes swept across the burly big man. She felt the same repressed breath from the demon cultivator as the red forest. She could conclude that the big man was the demon cultivator who drove the queen of fire ants to attack them. Is also a transformed rhinoceros beast. Their arrival attracted the attention of 2 waves of people. People from the 10 major families didn't care when they saw that Lance was bringing people. The other 2 metamorphosis stage demon cultivators swept their cultivation base, and their lips showed ridicule. Lu Muan swept it secretly with his divine sense, and found the aura of Mingxiu's servant, but he couldn't judge the position yet. Human sword masters, what do you guys want to break into this king's cave one after another? The feminine demon cultivator in Xingyi retracted his gaze on Lan Si and his group, and looked at the 10 major families coldly. Ask several sword sect powerhouses. An old man in the yellow-clothed sword sect who Lum Wen had never seen before sneered, "Humph, I don't know when this volcano became a cave dwelling that swallowed the sky. You, who have always liked the cold, can survive in this high temperature for a long time?" A joke. The femininity man exuded a coldness, and the big man beside him and the sixth-order monster behind him were all on guard, ready to take action. The battle is imminent. My evil imperial wife is too arrogant, trash against the world, BlackBelly evil wife is too arrogant author, Lan by Gezi. Chapter 114. The human cultivator and the demon cultivator took their respective positions and were ready to snatch the Tianhan golden crystal in the magma at any time. The feminine-looking demon cultivator looked coldly at several sword sects in the 10 major families, exuding a chilling air. This extremely cold mountain range is our demon cultivator's territory, and it is already a crime for you to trespass without authorization. It's unforgivable, and it's really whimsical to even want to compete for the heavenly frost gold crystal. Haha. A barefooted and tall human sword sect laughed, looked at the other party sarcastically and said, "Only your 2 demon cultivators in the early stage of transformation and those more than 10 sixth-order demon beasts dare to be here. It's ridiculous to make a big statement. The old man just lacks a high-level mount, and I will capture you all in a while. Then we will see how tough you are." The ancestor of the Shui family sneered, and his turbid eyes were full of light. Hearing his words, the big man standing beside the feminine male protagonist had a gloomy face, raised his hand, and a whirlwind with a powerful aura erupted from his fingertips and shot directly at the ancestor of the Shui family, courtesy of death. The ancestor of the Shui family snorted coldly, and when he let it go, a palm-sized emerald unicorn detached from his hand, and when it fell into the air, it suddenly became larger, and instantly emitted a faint green light. The powerful whirlwind was instantly blocked by the emerald unicorn, dissipated in the air, and the unicorn returned to the size of a palm and fell into the hands of the ancestors of the Shui family. One person and one demon were just testing each other, and the big man grinned and laughed, "You're nothing more than a magic weapon, come and see this, kings." The big man grabbed with 5 claws, and 2 azure rays of light suddenly flew from the depths of the cave, and then 2 sledgehammers covered with azure lines fell on his hands. He flew up, and volleyed the position of the ancestor of the Shui family a few times. From the sledgehammer, the hammer prints of the demonic force suddenly flew out, and they fell straight from the head of the ancestor of the Shui family. Demon cultivators don't just rely on their powerful bodies and innate magical powers to fight, they can also control human magic tools, and even many high-level demon cultivators will sneak into humans and pay a certain price to ask high-level refiners to refine them. Instruments suitable for their use. The Kinglin hammer held by this big man was forged by a third-grade item refiner in the eastern region, and it was very powerful. The ancestor of the Shui family squinted and spit out a breath of essence. The emerald unicorn in his hand emitted a more dazzling green light, spontaneously flew out of his palm, and fell on his head to form a green barrier. Boom, the hammer marks all fell and hit the emerald unicorn, making a few loud noises. Immediately, the hammer marks gradually faded and dissipated, and a crack appeared on the jade unicorn. The ancestor of the Shui family frowned and took back the magic weapon, staring deeply at the 2 giant hammers in the air of the big man. The magic weapon refined by Master Ning is really extraordinary. Master Ning is very famous in the eastern region. Although he is only a third-grade artifact refiner, every instrument is a high-quality item, and even in terms of perfect attributes, it can be beautiful with the instruments refined by a 4th-grade artifact refiner. It's just that he has a weird personality, and he rarely makes magic weapons for human monks, but instead cooperates with demon cultivators. Haha, Master Ning is much better than you greedy and hypocritical humans. Speaking of Master Ning, the eyes of the big Han Yaoxiu also showed a bit of reverence. Lum Wen looked at the two giant hammers with interest. This pair of spirit treasures is indeed extraordinary. Not only is the heat controlled very well during refining, but several materials suitable for demon cultivators have been added to make them even more powerful. Compared with Huo Xiao, it is indeed much stronger. When she has a chance, she would like to visit that Master Ning. Are you ready to go to war? The previous barefooted human Jianzong had war intent on his face. The big Han Yaoxiu held the giant hammer in his hand, and said arrogantly, I was just warming up just now, what's the hurry? Wouldn't it be more vigorous to fight when Tianhanjinjing is born? They are stalling for time. Mo Yan's voice sounded in Lum Wan's sea of consciousness. Lum Wan also found out that the demon cultivator on the opposite side didn't have a lot of fighting intentions even though he shot. Do they still have backhands? Or wait for reinforcements? Mo Yan's light eyes lit up with a faint light of unknown emotion. The transformation period demon cultivators in the center circle are also afraid that they are coming here. These two demon cultivators wanted to take it alone before, but now they face the 8 swordsmen. The strong human beings also had to spread the news of Tianhanjinjing. Lum Wan nodded. This time, apart from the Ling family and the 9th-ranked Wu family, there were no sword sect powerhouses dispatched, and the other 8 families sent the sword sect town. The Tianhan golden crystal is about to take shape, Lum Wan said solemnly as he swept his gaze towards the dark golden liquid in the center of the magma. Mo Yan's gaze towards Tianhanjinjing also showed a bit of fiery enthusiasm. This thing is only one of the best materials for refining magic tools for humans, but for their monsters, it is the world that shapes the tempered demon palace and tempered body. Spirits. As long as the Tianhan golden crystal is refined and absorbed into the demon bone and the demon marrow, the hardness and toughness of the demon beast's body will rise to a level, and more importantly, it is invincible when it hits the bottleneck. That is to say, as long as the Tianhanjinjing is left to refine during the rush, no matter what the bottleneck is, it will be in vain. It's a pity that a monster can only use the sky-cold gold crystal twice. Once it can be forged and tempered the level of the demon palace to help it become a heavenly grade, and once it can be used to hit a bottleneck under the 9th level and advance smoothly. Humph, do you want to delay the time and wait for the demon cultivator in the center circle to come to help? It's too late. The sword sects such as the Qi family are all old fellows who have lived for hundreds of years, and their scheming is naturally not weak, and they can also see the two demon cultivators intend. The feminine demon revisionist was about to speak and suddenly fixed his gaze on the dark golden liquid in the lava pool. Suddenly, the liquid in the magma pool suddenly emitted a dazzling golden light, and it bounced from the magma with a heart-pounding aura. Barefoot Sword Sect gave Shui family patriarch and Xian Bojian a look, and spit out a word, grab. Hey, immediately, 9 figures flew out in the direction of the golden light, and it was the 7 sword sects and the 2 demon cultivators on the human side. The Sword Emperor and Sword King below immediately greeted the dozen or so 6th order monsters that rushed over, and for a while, humans and monsters fought together. Lum Wan set her sights on Yezhan, who was still standing on the edge of the rock, and Lan Si, who was watching the show. Sure enough, only these 2 people knew the secret of Tianhanjinjing's birth. No. When her spiritual sense swept to a dark corner in the depths of the cave, a radiance overflowed from her lips, and the cultivator also knew. Boom, a rapid sound of the running of monsters fell. Then I saw more than 30 5th order monsters suddenly rushed out from the hillside, rushing towards the human monks. Lum Wan and the others in the trial were also swept away by the group of monsters, and the entire cave was in chaos. Sword lights flickered from time to time, and the roars of monsters kept echoing in the cave. Lum Wan saw that Lu Mubai and the others were meeting the crazy monsters. There was not much danger. She staggered the attacking monsters in a blink of an eye, and headed towards the lava pool. When he was about to approach the edge of the magma, he felt a chill on his back. Her eyes were cold, and she lightly shifted her toes and shifted position several times to avoid a sneak attack from behind her. As soon as he turned around, Lum Wan saw Li Xiang looking at her with murderous intent, and then flew towards her without hesitation with a sword. My evil imperial wife is too arrogant, trash against the world, BlackBelly evil wife is too arrogant. Author, Lan by Gezi. Chapter 115. Li Xiang had a strong killing intent on her body. She tore off a jade ornament hanging from her neck with one hand and squeezed it hard. When the jade shattered, a force that did not belong to her suddenly burst out from her dantian. The sealed water element energy penetrated into Li Xiang's meridians little by little, and her cultivation continued to climb. The high-level sword spirit broke through to the first-level sword king, followed by the middle-level sword king, the high-level sword king, and finally stopped at the peak of the sword king. Just like Gu Yanran last time, Li Xiang's face flushed with the power obtained by the sudden external force, her blood vessels were spewing out, and she was a little out of control. Li Xiang's change naturally attracted the attention of many people. Lan Si, who had moved to the magma pool and stood by the pool, watched with interest as Li Xiang condensed a water column that shot up into the sky and attacked Lum Wan. Yezhan didn't miss the look on his face watching a good show, and said, "Why don't you go up and help?" "She doesn't need it." Lance was obviously confident in Lum Wan. There was a strange brilliance in Yezhan's deep black eyes that seemed to contain thousands of people with great wisdom. He swept Li Xiang at will. This method of using external force to improve his cultivation was extremely harmful to himself, and she should not be Lum Wan's opponent. "Aren't you going to grab Tian Hanjinjing?" Lan Si asked with a smile when he saw Yezhan's eyes on the battle between Lum Wan and Li Xiang. Yezhan's voice was calm. "Why don't you go grab it?" Lans raised his head and looked at the sword sect who were chasing the golden rays of light not far away. The monsters and human monks who were affected by their violent sword energy were all buried, and sighed, "I am a junior of sword sovereign cultivation. What are you going to use to snatch those sword sects?" Yezhan smiled meaningfully. "Really? I'll be welcome at that moment." Lan Sijunya had a warm and harmless smile on her face, and both of them knew what it meant to be rude for a while. In the middle of the crowd, Lum Wan took out a golden whip and directly met Li Xiang's attack. Although this woman appeared to be a peak sword king, she only had the combat power of an intermediate sword king, and her experience was even less. That jet of water was swung by the golden whip and turned into countless water droplets and fell to the ground. "Lum Wan, today I first destroyed your dantian to avenge Yanran, and then I will send you on the road. It is also your honor to die in the birthplace of Tian Hanjinjing and other spirits." Li Xiang's right hand kept choking, the UN force from the body that was about to explode frantically poured into the long sword in his hand, and looked at Lum Wan with a sinister smile. Lum Wan sneered, "This woman's brain must have been muddy. I won't destroy your dantian, and let you be honored to be buried in the birthplace of Tian Hanjinjing." Lum Wan waved the whip with one hand and choked the other hand at the same time, and finally the red lips spit out a few words. "I will let you be buried in the belly of the monster, and be with the extreme cold mountain range forever." Li Xiang's face was angry. She raised her hand and waved. Countless water droplets flew from her long sword, like a string of bead curtains falling around Lum Wan. The crystal clear water beads were like chains of beads strung together with UN force, each emitting light blue light but not falling, forming an ellipse to surround Lum Wan. The UN force in Li Xiang's body was draining little by little. She knew that she would not maintain the peak sword king cultivation for too long. When the borrowed power in her body was consumed, she would not be Lum Wan's opponent. Therefore, after the tentative attack, she mobilized her whole body's energy to use her strongest ultimate move, and success or failure was determined by this move. Lum Wan felt that every drop of water on the bead curtain surrounding her carried a majestic energy, which was a manifestation of the solidification of water's energy. Formed by a mysterious force, it will not last longer than a quarter of an hour. Looking at the bead curtain that keeps shrinking and shrinking, with the potential to destroy the sky, as soon as it touches it, it will all explode immediately. She no longer hesitated, put away the golden long whip, stopped the choking movement in her hand, stretched out a bright wrist, and spread her palm. A whirlwind with an icy coolness rolled out of her palm and dispersed in all directions. Ding dong, the whirlwind rolled the bead curtain and made a clear and pleasant sound. After the water droplets were blown by the wind, they immediately turned into crystal clear ice droplets. They swayed constantly, and each string of collisions would sound an intoxicating note. After Lu Muan and Lexiang were fighting, the monsters were stunned for a while, as if they were addicted to it. Xiang felt that the Yuan force in her body seemed to be frozen, and her consciousness was in a trance. Unexpectedly, at the moment when she was in a trance, a white shadow flashed through the bead curtain and fell in front of her. She widened her eyes and wanted to stab Lu Muan with her sword, but she was very slow. She unconsciously showed panic on her face, and before the long sword fell on Lu Muan, she felt a pain in her heart. She slowly looked down at her chest, and saw a half-inch long dagger sticking straight into her heart. Why, what, can, Xiang's eyes were full of disbelief, looking at Lu Muan, who was smiling softly in front of him, and slowly spit out 4 words. Lu Muan took out a silk handkerchief and wiped her hands. Then, as soon as she loosened it, the handkerchief fell into the magma with the wind and immediately turned to ashes. She looked at Xiang and said, "Why is it impossible?" Xiang looked at Lu Muan's stunning face with a smile on her face, and there was not too much emotion in her eyes, it was a kind of ignorance. Lu Muan did not regard her as a real opponent at all, not even contempt, only indifferent. She watched the blood on her chest slowly congeal into red ice, and looked up at Lu Muan in disbelief. This woman turned out to be a dual attribute swordsman, but how can the fire attribute coexist with the ice attribute? Her eyes darkened, and a ruthless light burst out in an instant. Even if she died, she would drag Lu Muan and be buried with the swordsmen of the same rank here. Lu Muan naturally saw the doubt and cruelty in her eyes, but she didn't want to explain nonsense to her opponent at this time. With a wave of his hand, the golden whip swung out and rolled up Xiang's whole body. "I said that I want you to accompany the extreme cold mountains forever." Lu Muan hated others to hide behind her the most, attacked her sneakily, and she was never soft-hearted towards enemies. With a slight wave, Xiang's body fell in front of the 5th order ice crocodile who was trying to flee towards the entrance of the cave for some unknown reason. When the ice crocodile saw that a human was actually blocking its way, in a fit of rage, it bit Xiang's feet without hesitation, and began to bite and swallow. "Ah!" a shrill cry echoed in the cave. Lu Muan looked at Xiang's face and the fear in her eyes without showing too much expression. She was still indifferent. When she was in the immortal cultivation world, because she was not ruthless, she let go of an enemy for a while, and was finally turned back by that person and led him to besiege her. She was seriously injured and finally died. Since then, she will never be soft-hearted towards the enemy, she will kill if she needs to, and she will never let the fish slip through the net, otherwise she will be the one who will die in the future. Xiang's body couldn't bear the invasion of that mysterious power at all, and there was a faint tendency of self-destruction. She threw it into the monster's mouth and swallowed it to prevent Lexiang's self-explosive power from spreading to herself and others, but others didn't seem to think so. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. My evil imperial wife is too arrogant, trash against the world. BlackBelly evil wife is too arrogant. Author, Lan by Gezi. Chapter 116. When that shrill scream echoed in the cave, many people couldn't help but turn their attention to Xiang, who was being swallowed by the ice crocodile. Then his eyes shifted to Lu Muan again. She stood on a high rock, in a spotless white dress, with a cold and indifferent look, holding a golden long whip in her hand. The frozen water element power beads behind her were broken inch by inch, turning into light blue powder and swaying in the air. Many people cast a disapproving look at her. Lexiang used external force to improve her cultivation base and wanted to kill Lum Weian. But why did Lum Weian kill people and throw them in front of monsters for them to devour? Such an approach is too cruel. This is the thought in the minds of many disciples of the 10 great clans. The initial goodwill and admiration for Lum Weian faded in an instant, and even faintly disgusted with her. Lum Weian didn't care about other people's opinions, and didn't explain it. She turned to avoid the crazy monster and fell to the lava and stood quietly. Lum Weian, they think you are too cruel. Lance watched her stand beside her with a calm face, showing a gentle smile, as if she knew why she did this, without any resentment, but from an appreciation rose in my heart. He has seen countless women, they are cruel, kind, gentle, hypocritical, or arrogant, etc., but there has never been a woman who can constantly refresh his cognition like Lum Weian. Lum Weian didn't move, staring at the bubbling hot magma, and after a while he whispered, "It doesn't matter." Yezhan turned his head to look at the girl beside him, his eyes like the boundless sea fluctuated a little more. Ye Qinghan, Yunlan and the others looked at Lum Weian with soft eyes, and they were not disgusted by what she had done just now. Li Xiang was just courting death, so who was to blame? Bang, following the shrill screams and the roar of the monsters in the cave, the surrounding rocks swayed, and an explosion with strong UN force suddenly resounded throughout the cave. The people who were fighting and the monsters looked in the direction of the ice crocodile with lingering fears. At this time, the place had been razed to the ground, and more than 10 fifth-order monsters around were blown up with flesh and blood. This kind of power and Jianzong, the full blow of the strong, is not much different. It turns out that Lexiang wanted to use the borrowed power of his body to explode himself. The face of the person who felt Lum Weian was cruel just now turned pale. If Li Xiang's body hadn't been thrown so far and eaten by the ice crocodile, the self-exploding UN force would have been even greater, and the people and monsters they were fighting in the central area would be affected. The fights between the sword sect powerhouses are all under the pressure, because the disciples of all ethnic groups are all below, so the volatilized power has not spread to avoid hurting their own children. Kola Xiang obviously has no scruples at all. If they are affected by her self-destruction just now, they will be seriously injured if they don't die. People who had some sympathy for Li Xiang all spit out and annoyed in their hearts, but there were some different emotions in the eyes of Lum Weian. The look of disgust was replaced by complexity, and a few people still had a vague sense of gratitude in their eyes. Even if Li Xiang's target was Lum Weian, if he blew himself up, there was no distinction between enemy and me. This time, Lum Weian really saved them. Lum Weian had no intention of caring about the complex changes in her eyes. At this moment, her heart was pounding, as if something was calling her at the bottom of the deep lava pool. Lum Weian, are you really only 16 years old? My interest in you is really getting stronger and stronger. Lance suddenly came close to Lum Weian's ear, breathing evenly on her cochlea. Lum Weian stepped aside, frowned at Lance and said, "If you're bored, you might as well think about how to deal with Senior yet." A meaningful smile appeared on Lance's graceful and handsome face. "So you know besides him?" The look of surprise in Yezhan's eyes flashed, and then he restrained his emotions. He looked up and saw that the golden light caught by the ancestor of the Shui family suddenly overflowed from his fingers, and gathered together again into a brighter golden light. The light flew into the bottom of the lava pool. "Don't hide your clumsiness, whoever grabs it will own it." Yezhan immediately took out the jasper flute from his waist when the golden light fell into the magma, flew up, and slashed at the lava pool. Lance also put away the smile on his face, took out his long sword and swung a strong sword light at the magma. The sword sects who were fighting in the distance just looked at each other for a few inexplicable glances, and saw that part of the magma blasted away by Yezhan and Lance suddenly erupted into a column of magma fire. On the pillar of fire is a spar with a dark golden appearance, but a golden liquid flowing in the middle. In an instant, the beautiful rainbow above the mountain suddenly loomed over the fire column, and then turned into a colorful streamer and scattered on the dark golden spar. The golden liquid flowing in the spar instantly solidified, and a layer of soft light wrapped it, which was full of brilliance and breathtaking. A faint fragrance emanated from the Tianhanjinjing, filling the entire cave. This is the birth of Tianhanjinjing. A sword sex stared at Tianhanjinjing in a stunned manner, and immediately flew out, followed by 7 other lights and shadows. It's just that their speed is still a few steps behind the 2 silhouettes that are already close to the fire column. Lum Wan's eyes flashed brightly, a hand hidden in his sleeve kept choking, tapped his toes, and flew towards the pillar of fire. She slapped it out, and a hurricane with the icy cold rolled out of the surrounding fiery heat. No one noticed that a transparent jade-colored rune in the hurricane was quietly mixed into the ice essence force, and it hit the pillar of fire silently. And the pillar of fire that shot up into the sky, together with the golden crystal of the sky that was bred on it, was instantly wrapped in a layer of frost and turned into an icicle. Yejan frowned, the jasper flute slashed again, and a soft and inclusive light roared out, slashing straight at the top of the icicle, slashing the Tianhan golden crystal wrapped in ice. Lan Si's lips curled up in an arc, and the long sword in his hand slashed down with a force that destroyed the sky and the earth, flying out in an unreasonable direction. The 2 grabbed a piece each in different directions, but Lum Wan stopped, standing on the icicle with his arms crossed, watching others snatch it. The other sword sex flew in 3 directions without thinking about it, all with the intention of taking a piece first and then talking about it. Who knew that before he touched Tianhanjinjing, he was blocked by the countless sword chi that suddenly spread out from a corner. Then a man in red with a silver mask appeared in the air without knowing it. He was tall, with a domineering and noble temperament that looked down on the world. He just waved his hands at will, and the 3 Tianhan golden crystals that were flying towards the outside actually flew around obediently and then turned back and fell into his palm. The deity of Tianhanjinjing wants it. My evil imperial wife is too arrogant, trash against the world, BlackBelly evil wife is too arrogant. Author, Lan by Gezi. Chapter 117. Ming Xiu in mid-air stretched out his hand and held the 3 frozen Tianhan golden crystals in his hand, and looked indifferently and swept the surrounding sword sects. He picked up a piece of Tianhanjinjing at will, and looked down with a bit of playfulness in his eyes. His tone was extremely arrogant. This Tianhanjinjing is in the hands of this deity. If you want, come and get it. Humph, where are the arrogant people who came out? You and I are both sword sects, and you alone want to provoke all of us. It's really courting death. The ancestor of the Shui family looked at the man in red in the sky with cold eyes. This man gave him a sense of oppressive danger, but the attraction of Tianhanjinjing was too great. He suggested to the other sword sects and the 2 demon cultivators, come together, whoever wins the Tianhan golden crystal will be the one. His words made the other sword sects and the 2 demon cultivators tempted, and they flew up at the same time, surrounded the cultivators, and mobilized their Yuan to sacrifice magic tools to kill him first and then capture the Tianhan golden crystal. Yejan, who was standing beside the lava pool, did not join the siege of Mingxiu. He had a far-reaching vision. Seeing Lance walking to the side with a piece of Tianhanjinjing, he unconsciously said, "That person is very strong." Lance swept the icicle above Lum Wan, who was watching the battle with a deep meaning, and then turned his attention to the man in red with the silver mask. These people are all going to die. The indifference in the eyes of Mingxiu, surrounded by the group, did not change much, as if these sword sects were inconspicuous in front of him. They were despised, and this was the first feeling of several sword sects. Go, the ancestor of the Shui family narrowed his eyes and took out a red silk ribbon from his sleeve. This is his high-level spiritual treasure, and every time it is sacrificed, it will be unfavorable. It can trap the sword master of the same level in the red silk. Although it is not long, but it is also fully prepared to kill people. Following the ancestors of the Shui family, all the sword sects who besieged Mingxiu either waved their swords and slashed furiously, or launched attacks on Lingbao. In an instant, rays of light of different colors lit up in the mid-air of the cave, with a strong coercion. The monsters and swordsmen below felt extremely depressed, and it was difficult to move. There was a light arc on Mingxiu's lips, and he had a golden longsword in his hand. A violent metallic Yuan-Li sword chi swayed out from the long sword, forming 9 golden hurricanes, slashing straight towards the 7 people and the 2 demons. The hurricane formed by the sword chi swept across, and the sword chi that was swung towards him dissipated, and the spiritual treasures also became dim and returned to the hands of those few people. With ignorance in his eyes, he slashed again, a cyclone erupted from his long sword, and immediately turned into 9 golden rays of light that shot directly at the 7 people and 2 demons. The 7 people and the 2 demons showed horror in their eyes, and immediately took out defensive instruments to resist, or slashed with swords. Colorful rays of light exploded in mid-air, and the overflowing violent energy immediately spread to the bottom. Seeing this, Ye Zhan frowned, took off a red jade pendant he was wearing, and threw it on top of the elite disciples of the 10 major families. The red jade pendant suddenly became countless times larger, forming a powerful shield. Those overflowing colorful Yuan-Li Ziyuan light fell on the jade pendant, but it was shaken and dispersed. The elite disciples of the 10 major families below were all deeply relieved. If they were hit by all kinds of colorful rays of light, they would explain it here today. Puff. The battle in mid-air was quickly resolved. The 7 people, the 2 demons, and the 9 golden swords were more or less injured when they faced each other, and some people couldn't help but spit out a mouthful of blood. What? The elite disciples below continued to battle the monsters while observing the battle above. But the scene that made them stunned appeared. The clan elders in their family were slashed and injured by the evil man in red. It was incredible. There was only one thought in everyone's mind at this time: who is this man? What kind of cultivation? Too strong. Lu Muan couldn't help showing surprise in her eyes. She had long known that Mingxiu was a very strong man, but she didn't expect it to be so strong. However, this fellow was able to kill the sword sect by leaps and bounds when he was the sword emperor. At this time, he was already a sword sect's cultivation base. In addition, his strength after being washed by the foundation building pill was naturally swept by the sword sect of the same rank. Lu Muan, do you know the hall master of the 9 layers hall? Lance had been observing Lu Muan's expression, and when she saw a smear of clarity in her eyes, he jumped on the icicle and asked with a smile. Lu Muan looked at him inexplicably and asked, 9 halls. Listening to Lance's tone, Mingxiu should be the master of the 9 layers hall, but she has never heard of this name. The Zhouzhong Temple is a major force in the Tianling continent, and it is also the real manipulator behind the Underworld Union Chamber of Commerce, and the man in red wearing a mask is the hall master of the Zhouzhong Temple. Lan Si saw Lu Muan's puzzled look. It's not a lie, it's not a concealment. Lu Muan restrained her emotions and asked with a smile, what's his name? Lance hides a deep secret. I am afraid that the background of the academy teacher is also fake. Being able to recognize the meditation also represents his extraordinariness. I don't know, everyone calls him His Royal Highness Emperor Ming. Lan Si approached Lu Muan with a meaningful smile and said, what's his name? Lu Muan, you should know. Why? Lu Muan raised an eyebrow. Lance's tone was firm, half cliché and half affirmation. She was really curious about how he knew that he knew Mingxiu. That day, you got into trouble with the Sword Emperor at the auction, wasn't he the one who came out to save you? Lan Si also participated in the auction. Others only knew that the Emperor Ming acted to maintain the order of the Ming Alliance Chamber of Commerce, but he discovered that there was a very weak mental power fluctuation that spread from the Emperor Ming to Lu Muan. Therefore, he was sure that the two not only knew each other but also had friendship. Lum Wan's eyes were blank, but he had to praise Lance in his heart for being a fox. She doesn't deny knowing Ming Xiu, nor does she admit it herself, so let the blue fox guess. Lum Wan, you little fox, Lan Si whispered softly, putting his head close to Lum Wan's ear. A nice voice came to Lum Wan's ears along with her breathing. She was not used to being so close to people. She tapped her toes and jumped from the icicle to the edge of the lava pool. The blue fox was clearly moving towards him. She was cliched, and she was too lazy to pay attention to him. Seeing Lum Wan's helpless expression, Lan Si immediately felt that this woman was also quite cute, and couldn't help but let out a low laugh. But he couldn't laugh long, because not far away, a golden sword gas turned into an arc and slashed straight towards him. There was a hint of coldness in Ming Xiu's eyes. Just now, this man was very unhappy when he deliberately got close to the little woman. At this time, he dared to get so close to molest him, and a murderous intent radiated from him. Lan Si squinted his eyes slightly, with a touch of imperceptible interest on his lips, stretched out his long sword and swung it with all his strength, and immediately jumped off the icicle. Kaka, the two swords met each other. Lance's sword energy was quickly annihilated and dissipated, and the golden sword energy directly split the icicle into several pieces. Lum Wan, Emperor Ming is jealous. If you don't act, the teacher will die. My evil imperial wife is too arrogant, trash against the world, BlackBelly evil wife is too arrogant. Author, Lan by Gezi. Chapter 118. Lance's voice transmission sounded in Lum Wan's sea of consciousness. She glanced sideways at Lance. She couldn't hear the fear of meditation in the fox's voice, but it was full of jokes. Woman, don't allow other men to come 3 steps away from you in the future. Immediately afterwards, Ming Xiu's magnetic, clear, and pleasant voice also spread to Lum Wan's sea of consciousness. As soon as she raised her head, she met those deep obsidian eyes, and there was a faint anger in those eyes. Lum Wan's lips slightly raised an arc. This fellow is really stingy. He's my teacher, you solve the others first. Ming Xiu's wildly flying red robe swayed slightly, and he was not in a good mood to withdraw his attention from Lance. He swept the 7 sword sects and 2 disguised demon cultivators who did not dare to act rashly. Take out your cards and try your best to fight against the deity. If you win Tianhanjinjing, it is yours. The tone was as arrogant as it was, and as arrogant as it was. Ha ha. It's interesting. Suddenly there was a burst of laughter from outside the cave, and the sound was getting closer and closer, and finally it was deafening. Several disciples with Sword King level strength covered their ears in pain. Lum Wan's mental power in the sea of consciousness immediately formed a chi swirl to suppress the voice with a strong coercion like a curse, and her eyes turned solemnly to the 3 figures that suddenly appeared in the cave and stood in the air. The leader was an elegant-looking young man, followed by a woman in yellow and a masked man in blue. 8th Order Demon Cultivator Lum Wan's eyes sank. The arrival of the 3 demon cultivators stopped both the people in the cave and the demons from fighting, and the eyes of several sword sects were shocked when they swept to the man's cultivation base. Meet the Ice Master. The 2 demon cultivators who had been besieging Ming Xiu before saw the 3 demons coming, their eyes stunned, and they were obviously surprised, but they did not dare to hesitate and immediately went up to pay their respects. The leading elegant man was holding a feather fan, with an elegant scholarly temperament, and he felt that he could not hang on to the metamorphosis demon cultivator. His eyes were indifferent, but just casually swiping it made people shiver. Whose hands should you take out the Tianhanjinjing? The emperor wants it. His tone was light, as if he was just talking about an unimportant matter. At this time, the sword sects of the 10 major families in the air retreated to the side one after another. What a big tone! What if the deity said no? Ming Xiu's voice was cold, but the arrogance did not restrain. Hearing what Emperor Ming said, Yezhan and Lan Si looked at each other silently. The elegant Ice Master was stunned for a moment, and then sneered a few times, A human cultivator with sword sex strength dares to call himself the deity in front of the emperor. It's really interesting. Interesting? The deity finds it very boring. There was no fear in Ming Xiu's eyes, as if the difference in cultivation between them was nothing. Okay. You have a personality, I like it. The Ice Master looked around Ming Xiu with great interest, not only was not angry, but he also expressed some appreciation. Take off your mask and let this emperor see. If you look good, as handsome as the emperor intended, it would be fine if Han Jinjing rewarded you that day. Lum Wan felt the constant rush of cold air from Ming Xiu's body, and couldn't help twitching the corners of his mouth, feeling that this monster is a broken sleeve. The deity still lacks a flying mount, but the descendants of the ancient Ice Luan can take care of one or two. There was a chill in the deep black eyes of Ming Xiu, and his mouth overflowed with a clear and sinister laughter. Do you think that how's it going? The smile in the Ice Master's eyes disappeared, replaced by a coldness. This evil and charming man not only knew that he was a descendant of the ancient Bingluan, but also wanted to take him as a mount. He was really shameless, and this also made him feel a wave of anger that he had never felt before. Hi! The man and the woman behind the Ice Master and the two demon cultivators couldn't help but gasp when they heard Ming Xiu's words. This human swordsman is so bold. The Ice Master looks bookish on the surface, but his temperament is very changeable and ruthless. At this time, in their eyes, meditation is equal to death. If you want to take this emperor as a mount, you have to show some skills. This emperor wants to bring you back to the cave for Xuangziu. Such beauty is rare. Ice Lord's eyes were cold, but his mouth was very cheap. This place is too small. How about we go out to fight? Ming Xiu didn't care about the lives of others, but he was afraid that a fight with this 8th order demon cultivator would affect Lum Wan and her brother. The Ice Master glanced at the human cultivator below, and chuckled. It's not a good problem to be soft-hearted, and you have to change it after following this emperor. This deity is too lazy to grind your skin with this bird. Let's fight. Ming Xiu's eyes were dyed with a strong fighting spirit. After he was promoted, he always wanted to fight against swordsman-level people or monsters, and this stinky bird will send him. Came to the door. He exchanged glances with Lum Wan obscurely, and Ming Xiu turned into a red light and shot straight at the entrance of the hole with a "Ha! Woman, be careful, and wait for the deity to come back." As the red light disappeared into the hole, Lum Wan's voice also sounded in the ear of a cultivator. She frowned, and there was a faint worry in her expression. It is really hard to predict the outcome of the middle-level sword sex cultivator and the demon cultivator in the early 8th level. That Ice Master is not an ordinary monster. Like Mo Yan, it is a royal monster. Although the bloodline is slightly worse than that of the spirit-devouring beast, its combat power is absolutely powerful. The Ice Master saw that Ming Xiu disappeared in the blink of an eye. His lips showed interest, and a flash turned into a blue light and disappeared into the cave. The remaining man and woman looked at each other in dismay. This time, they invited the Ice Master to win the Heavenly Frost Gold Crystal. Who knew that the ignorant Ice Master became interested in a human man, and they did not dare to pull their teeth out. Mo Yan, who do you think is stronger between Ming Xiu and the Ice Lord? Lum Wan asked Mo Yan through a voice transmission. Mo Yan raised his eyelids, his voice still light. It should be Ming Xiu. Lum Wan laughed, with a teasing tone in her tone. That bird might not be interested in meditation after seeing you, Mo Yan. Doingziu can communicate better between the same race. Idiot woman. Mo Yan couldn't help scolding for the first time, and then closed his eyes and ignored Lum Wan again. This woman really needs to be beaten. Lum Wan liked to see the indifferent Mo Yan's face change the most, and couldn't help laughing in a low voice. Tian'e Shanmang, in addition to the man in red who got the Tian Hanjinjing, did those two also grab it? The glamorous lady in yellow who followed the Ice Master raised her wrist lightly, her fingertips facing Ye Cham and Lance's direction. The feminine demon cultivator nodded, looking at the two of them with greed in their eyes. They grabbed a piece by themselves. The woman's face showed a gorgeous smile, and she glanced at the masked man in azure cloth beside her, and then flew towards Yezhan and the two of them. After the Ice Lord left, the monsters below all dissipated the pressure that was pressing on them, roaring and biting at the disciples of the 10 major families. Lum Wan was curious about the battle between Ming Xiu and the Ice Lord, and wanted to follow him, but after moving a few steps, he saw several men in black rush in from outside. She suddenly felt an inexplicable sense of ominousness in her heart. The murderous aura of these people was too heavy, and they didn't look like they were here to rob Tian Hanjinjing. Sure enough, the men looked around in the cave, and when they saw her, their eyes showed endless murderous intent, and they rushed to surround her. Sorry, there is an urgent matter in the last 3 days, double shift, and then resume the third shift. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. My evil imperial wife is too arrogant, trash against the world, BlackBelly evil wife is too arrogant author, Lan by Gezi. Chapter 119. The men in black who came suddenly caught the attention of others, but they were a little surprised when they saw that their target was Lum Wan. This woman really makes trouble wherever she goes, a proper troublemaker. Who are you? Lum Wan held a long golden whip in his hand, and a hand hidden in his sleeve kept choking. The killing intent in the eyes of these people is too deep, it seems that they are here for her. The leading black-clothed man's voice was hoarse and cold, you will understand when you see Hades. I want to see who is going to see Hades today. There was a rare stern look in Lum Wan's eyes. These people are really deceiving people. From Guyan Ran onwards, they came to provoke them one by one, all thinking of killing her. Mud Bodhisattva also has a 3-point fire nature, she is really angry. Yanar Lumuabai saw 6 men in black surrounded Lum Wan, he split the 5th order monster in front of him in half, and with the toes, he jumped to her side. You came to the door on your own initiative, the black-clothed leader sneered and made a gesture to the 6 people, kill. The other 5 quickly dispersed after obeying their orders. When Ye Qinghan and Yunlin saw this, they resolved the fighting monsters as quickly as possible, jumped over one after another, drew their swords and swept them, and collided with several sword chi. Lum Wan was not idle either, she kept waving the whip, and golden arc circles flew out from her whip, blocking the 2 sword chi easily. Lumuabai's long sword slashed into the sky, and several lightning bolts sounded from the cave, slashing fiercely towards the sword energy that was attacking them. The leading man in black obviously didn't expect the 2 of them to be so strong, and the strength of the sudden reinforcements was not weak. With a gloomy look in his eyes, he roared, "Place the sword array." After his words fell, the 5 men immediately released the long swords in their hands and staggered them in the air, forming a gossip shape. The leading man's eyes were fierce, and he took the lead in smashing a piece of jade pendant hanging around his neck, and a force that did not belong to him erupted from his dantian. He sprayed his essence on the long sword in his hand, and muttered a few words. The long sword flew out of his hand and landed in the center of the 5 long swords. Seeing this, the 5 of them did not hesitate to tear off the jade pendant around their necks and smash them, borrowing external force to cultivate their bases. When the leader reached the peak of the Sword King, and when the other 5 reached the peak of the Sword King, Chi shot out 6 gray rays of Yuan Li from his fingertips, and crossed an arc in the air directly into the 6 long swords. The 6 long swords hummed as if they had spirituality. The sword body shook a few times, and each flew up and slashed out, and the sword chi aimed at the 2 brothers and sisters of the Lu family and stabbed fiercely. Lu Muabai snorted coldly, and a dark green leaf-shaped magic weapon flew out of his hand, facing the grey sword lights coming from the thorns. The leaves made a swirl in the air, and slowly spread out in all directions, and instantly enveloped Lum Wan and the others. Clang, the sword chi fell on the leaves and made countless crisp sounds. When the 6 men in black saw this, They sat cross-legged on the spot and kept making marks on their chests. They bit their tongues and spewed 6 mouthfuls of blood into the sword formation, using their bodies as a tripod. With the acceleration of the handprint, the UN force in their bodies also formed 6 vortexes from the top of their heads, and the constant UN force was sent to the among the 6 long swords. The sword formation hummed again, and the grey light shone brightly, and the sword chi that was pressing on Lu Muebai's leaf spirit treasure was replenished immediately when it was about to die. Dang dang, the sword energy kept hitting the leaves. Lu Muebai spit out a breath of essence and landed on the leaves, and a soft dark green light emanated from the leaves. With a sudden blow, the grey sword energy was finally blasted away and disappeared, but there were also a few cracks on the leaves. The 6 people were stunned, their eyes were stern, and they speeded up the transmission of UN force. The 6 long swords in the sword array scattered out from the shape of the gossip, forming a 6-star attack force, and the sword chi erupted from the sword array. Out! Yeching snorted coldly, and a seal engraved with a white tiger was released from his hand, and a huge white tiger suddenly roared out in midair. Roar! With a loud roar, the figure of the white tiger jumped out, waving 2 sharp claws and grabbing directly at the sword chi, blocking the sudden attack of the sword chi again and again. Yunlan and the others also released their own spiritual treasures to fight against the sword energy, causing them to stalemate in the air, not giving in to each other. Suddenly from the hillside, another 6 men in black dressed in the same clothes rushed down, and immediately joined the battle when they saw the opposing situation in front of them. Master Secret Envoy. As soon as they entered the cave, they respectfully greeted the leading man who was sitting cross-legged. Quickly end the sword formation. The man's gloomy voice sounded again. Yes. Several people immediately sat cross-legged, and 6 identical long swords flew out of their hands and immediately merged into the sword formation. The sword formation shone brightly, making a few coercive humming sounds. The 12 long swords formed a 7-star trend. This was the complete sword formation. The 6 people smashed the jade pendants around their necks, and the force from the dungeon also formed a cyclone above their heads, constantly sending UN force to the sword formation. Boom! With the complete combination of the sword formation, and the supply of UN force from the 6 peak sword kings, the sword energy in the sword formation instantly sent out countless bursts, directly killing Lu Muebai and others' spiritual treasures. A bang back. Lu Muian's gestures kept changing. Just as the sword energy broke through the defense of Yekinghan and the others' spiritual treasures, she let out a light sound, and a fire dragon flew out from behind her with a thunderous momentum. An ice dragon then rushed up from the front of her, and the 2 dragons raised their heads in the air and roared to meet the countless sword chi that fell on their heads. Boom! The 2 flying dragons with different attributes, Huo Yuan Li Ningxi and Bing Yuan Li, swung out with a grab, and all the sword chi that came to him were caught and disintegrated. Yekinghan and the others were already prepared to be injured. After Lu Muian's 2 solid flying dragons blocked and defeated the sword chi, they were relieved, and each took out other spiritual treasures to help out. The leading man in black obviously did not expect Lu Muian to have such an ability. He gritted his teeth, and his hoarse and cold voice echoed in the ears of more than a dozen men in black. The power is increasing by a level, and they will be killed today. After he finished speaking, he took the lead in slapping the broken jade in his hand on the ground, and the broken jade immediately turned into a pile of powder, but an invisible external force penetrated into his body. And his cultivation base immediately broke through from the peak of the Sword Emperor to the primary sword sect. 12 cyclones continued to expand from the top of their heads, and streams of deep UN force were input into the 7-star sword formation. The grey gas in the sword formation was deeper, and countless sword gas gathered into 2 giant swords and phantom slashed straight towards the 2 flying dragons. Bang! A violent crash sounded, and the 2 giant swords cut the 2 roaring dragons into 2 pieces. My evil imperial wife is too arrogant, trash against the world, BlackBelly evil wife is too arrogant author, Lan by Gezi. Chapter 120. The power of the sword formation was too great, and the ice and fire Xuanglong gradually became transparent and bleak after being chopped into two sections. Go, the leading man in black formed a seal and roared. The giant sword phantom formed by the condensed two swords slashed down again, directly defeating the two dragons. After the two dragons of ice and fire disappeared, the giant sword did not stop, but slashed straight at the faces of Lu Muan and Lu Muabai. Lu Muabai's eyes showed a ruthless look and firmness that Mo had never seen before. He bit his fingers and chanted an obscure incantation in his mouth. A few drops of blood were dripping down, and finally they all flew towards his eyebrows. A layer of blood-red mist emanated from him, spreading through the entire sword formation with a depressing pressure. Surprisingly, two huge blood-colored figures emerged from the blood mist in a short while, and they flew up together, heading towards the two giant swords. Lu Muan was stunned. Her eldest brother's practice was too weird. The blood spirit born from its own essence and blood is not weaker than the two giant swords and shadows. This kind of exercise will definitely cause great damage to the body. She exuded a cold and stern determination all over her body, and spewed out a stream of essence mixed with blood and essence from her mouth, which fell to the position where Xuanglong was beheaded before. Immediately, two transparent jade belts jumping with complicated symbols suddenly appeared in the air, floating lightly and floating around the blood spirit of Lu Muabai. The color of the blood spirit instantly changed from blood red to dark red, and the mysterious talisman jade belt was constantly floating around. A soul-stirring power emanated from the blood spirit, causing the human cultivators and demon cultivators in the cave to turn their attention, and many people were shocked. The black-collared man also showed shock in his eyes. He closed his eyes and opened them again. Instead of everything, he took out a sharp knife and stabbed him in the chest. Blood spurted out of his heart and merged into the top of his head. The Yuanli cyclone on. The gray cyclone doubled in size again, with a trace of blood in the middle, and then the entire cyclone flew into the sky and plunged directly into the sword formation. The other 11 people took out sharp knives and stabbed them in the chest. Likewise, 11 gray and bloodshot cyclones fell into the sword formation. There was a huge buzzing sound from the sword formation, and the gray light shone on the entire cave, which only felt extremely dazzling. Then, the 12 long swords in the sword formation were all shattered, turning into 12 gray streaks and submerging into the shadows of the two giant swords with sword energy that seemed to destroy the world. The giant sword phantom swelled in a circle, slashing down heavily with a feeling of wanting to annihilate the sky. Lu Muabai and Lu Muan transported their whole body Yuan force into the blood spirit. Ye Qinghan, Yunlan and others did not hesitate at all. They condensed into a Yuan force light ball in their palms and injected them into the blood spirit. The light of the blood spirit also became red and dazzling. With a height of 10 feet, the momentum became stronger and stronger, and there was a sense of destroying the world. I'll help you too. Lan Si, who was fighting against the yellow-clothed female demon cultivator, ripped open a seal in his body. A violent Yuan force was aroused from his dantian, and he was about to break through when he saw his cultivation. He suddenly turned his energy into a blue ball of light, flicked his finger, and the ball of light flew into the blood spirit instantly. The Yuan force in his body also returned to calm. His cultivation base was suppressed, and he stayed at the peak of the Sword Emperor. He smiled at the woman in yellow with a gentle smile, poured the remaining power left by the power of Yuan Li into the long sword, and waved it at the woman. What? The woman never thought that a human swordsman with the strength of the Sword Emperor would be so difficult to deal with, but she was a big step higher than the other party in level. Now the opponent's attack made her feel a sense of palpitations, and a shadow of death emerged spontaneously, and she immediately took out her strongest defense to protect herself. The temperature of the sword fell on the demon shield in front of her, and slowly eroded, but in a moment, countless gaps like spider webs appeared on the shield. Into a woman's body. What? The beautiful woman in yellow clothes stared at Lance in disbelief, her eyes widened and she fell to the ground, her breath gradually disappearing. When Lance just tore open the seal, Yezhan also condensed the UN force in his body into a pale green light ball and injected it into the blood spirit. He put the flute in his hand to his mouth and blew softly, and a string of beautiful notes floated out from the flute. The Xingyi masked demon Jiu who fought with him seemed to be disturbed by something, and the demon consciousness was confused. When he used his will to forcibly recover, an invisible force defeated the demon palace hidden in his dungeon. A cyan monster crystal nucleus burst out from his body. Yezhan stretched out his hand to grab it, and the crystal nucleus fell into his hand. In addition to observing Lum Wen fighting against the men in black, other sword sect and elite disciples were also watching Yezhan and Lan Si's battle. The two 7th Order Metamorphosis stage demon cultivators were lost in their hands, silently. Jianzong, who was originally tempted by Tianhanjinjing and wanted to snatch it, and the two demon cultivators at the beginning also stopped and looked at the two with fear. The movements of Yezhan and the others were the same, but the time was only an instant, which happened before the giant sword and the blood spirit. Roar! With Yezhan and Lan Si's Yuan Li light ball injected, the blood spirit let out a deafening roar that resounded through the sky. The figure of the blood spirit continued to grow, and finally turned into a blood-colored giant, also with a tendency to destroy the world, and patted the two giant swords with both hands. The disciples with low cultivation bases were shocked by the roar and bleeding from their ears and noses. Upon seeing this, the sword sects of the 10 major families immediately took action to condense a layer of shields with UN force to cover all the elite disciples. These are the best elite disciples of the family, but they can't all be lost because of this training, otherwise they won't be able to explain it when they go back. With the shield of the sword sect powerhouse, the disciples below avoided the possibility of serious injury and death. While heaving a sigh of relief, they all looked up at the blood spirit and the giant sword. At this time, the power of the blood spirit and the giant sword is that even the strong swordsmen dare not approach, otherwise they will definitely not die or be seriously injured. Boom! Xueling's two huge hands grabbed the two giant swords, and a burst of force that shook the sky and earth after the collision instantly burst out from the hole. Along with Yezhan and Lan Si, the expressions of the other sword sects changed, and they quickly input UN force to strengthen the shield to protect the safety of the disciples below. Bang bang, the two forces exploded and cancelled together, flying straight into the sky, blasting the entire active volcano into a huge hole. The cave shook violently, and the falling rocks rolled down. After more than 10 breaths, the two forces dissipated in the sky with a palpitating feeling. Lu Mubai and Lu Mubai each spat out a mouthful of blood and took a few steps back. The 12 men in black were not much better. The blood dyed them all red, but when they looked at Lu Muyan, there was scarlet and madness in their eyes. The 11 people used a secret method to get out of their bodies and put them into the leader of the black-clothed man. The man suddenly burst into flames before everyone could guard against it, and went straight to Lu Muyan.